Nobody at my mother's funeral seemed to notice the thin, grey-haired man standing beneath the old sycamore tree near the back of the cemetery, not my aunts whispering about casserole dishes, not the pastor flipping through his notes, not even the neighbors who came only out of obligation. But the moment I saw him, something in my chest tightened as if a memory I didn't have was trying to surface. The April wind carried the smell of damp earth and lilies, and as the coffin rested above its future home, everyone looked either bored or politely devastated. Everyone except him. He stood still, hands clasped together, head bowed slightly, not in a performative way, but with a quiet sorrow that seemed out of place among people who barely remembered my mother's middle name. I tried not to stare, but my eyes kept drifting back to him. Maybe it was because he didn't match the rest of the scene. His coat was old but clean, his face lined but gentle, his posture strong despite his age, and his eyes, when he finally lifted them, had the distant, shimmering grief of someone who knew exactly what he'd lost. Rehook. But the strange part wasn't that he was there, it was the way he looked at me, like he'd been waiting. When the ceremony ended and people began drifting away, some to their cars, some to the reception, some simply relieved their social obligation had expired, the old man remained rooted to the spot, not moving, not blinking, watching the coffin descend with a reverence that made my throat tighten unexpectedly. I stood alone near the folding chairs, unsure of what came next. My mother had been many things, most of them complicated, and now that she was gone, silence felt like the loudest part of her absence. I was still staring at the fresh mound of dirt when the old man approached me. "Forgive me," he said softly, voice trembling at the edges. "I didn't want to disturb you." His voice gentle, familiar in a way that made no sense. "It's fine," I murmured, unsure why I suddenly felt nervous. "Did you know my mother?" He looked down as if deciding how much truth he was allowed to give. "Yes," he whispered, in ways she never spoke about. A cold ripple went through me. "I don't understand." He didn't elaborate. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a cream-colored envelope, worn at the corners, my name written across it in my mother's handwriting, the handwriting she hadn't used in years, the handwriting from birthday cards she wrote when I was still small enough to sit on her lap. "She asked me to give this to you," he said. I felt the ground tilt. "Asked you when?" He hesitated again. "A long time ago." Before I could ask anything else, he pressed the envelope into my hand. His fingers trembled slightly against mine. "She wasn't ready then," he whispered, "but I believe she hoped one day the right moment would find you." I stared at him, heart pounding, but before I could form a single coherent question, he stepped back. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said, then walked away so quickly, with such purpose, that it felt like he feared he'd lose his nerve if he stayed. I stood frozen in place, the envelope burning in my hand. Rehook. But something told me this wasn't just a letter. It was the beginning of something else, something that had been waiting decades in the dark. I drove home without remembering the drive. I sat at my kitchen table for nearly 20 minutes staring at the envelope, tracing the familiar curve of my name. Mum hadn't left me anything else, no diaries, no recorded messages, no sentimental boxes of memories, just this. When I finally opened it, a folded letter slid out. Her handwriting was shaky but intentional. "My darling, there is something I never told you, something I should have shared long before now. I was young when I had you, young, scared, and too proud to admit that love had made me reckless. You grew up believing one thing about your family, but the truth is, there is more." I felt my pulse in my throat. "Please don't hate me for protecting you in the only way I knew. The man you called your father loved you in his own flawed way, but he was not the one who gave you life. The truth is harder, messier, and older than that." My breath froze somewhere between my lungs and my grief. "Your father was a man I loved deeply, but the world was not kind to him, or to us. And the biggest lie I ever told was the one where I said he disappeared because he didn't love you. He left because he thought you deserved better than what he could be." I read the line again, unsure if my eyes were playing tricks. "He left. Because of me. Because of us. There was someone else too," her letter continued. "Someone who tried to stay. Someone I pushed away because I didn't believe he could give you the life I wanted for you. He was connected to your father in ways I never understood, deeper ways that tied them together long before I met either of them." I blinked hard. "Connected? How? His name is Samuel." Samuel. The name echoed in my head. "The stranger at the funeral." My breath stuttered. "If he came today, please listen to him. He carries a truth I never had the courage to say out loud." The letter ended there. No explanation, no closure, just a sudden cliff where her voice vanished, and I was left holding the echo of something enormous, something that rattled every foundation I believed my life stood on. I folded the letter carefully, staring at my mother's signature as if she might appear in the room and explain everything. Rehook. But her silence was part of the story, and now it was up to me to unravel the rest of it. By the time the sun set, I found myself driving again, this time not aimlessly, but with a direction shaped by instinct more than logic. Something inside me whispered that Samuel hadn't gone far, that someone who came to a funeral like that wasn't the kind of man who left without leaving traces of meaning behind. I returned to the cemetery first. The groundskeeper said he saw an older man walk toward the garden path behind the mausoleum. I searched there, but he was gone. I went to the small diner near the funeral home. No one had seen him. I checked the bus stop bench near the cemetery gates. Empty. By late evening, I sat in my car gripping the steering wheel, unsure whether I was chasing a ghost or a truth that was never meant to be found. Just when I thought I might give up, headlights flashed behind me. I turned. A figure approached through the dim streetlights, slow, purposeful. Samuel. He stopped beside my car, face illuminated by the soft gold of the lamp above. I thought you might come looking, he said. I stepped out, heart trembling. I read her letter. A sadness washed over his face, deep, weathered, familiar. I hoped you would. Who are you? I asked, voice sharper than I intended. What do you know about my father? Why did my mother tell you to give me that letter? He closed his eyes for a moment, breathing out a shaky sigh. Because the truth she carried was heavier than she could hold, he whispered. And now? I asked. He opened his eyes. Now it's mine to give you. His voice cracked. And it's time you knew who I really am. For a long moment, Samuel and I just stood there beneath the pale glow of the street, the night pressing in around us like a question neither of us was brave enough to answer. And when he finally said, "It's time you knew who I really am," I felt something inside me shift, not dramatically, not violently, but in the quiet, seismic way a foundation moves before a house realizes it's no longer the same shape it used to be. His eyes, soft and gray and threaded with a lifetime of stories he hadn't told, lingered on my face as if searching for permission to continue. But all I could manage was a small nod. My breath caught somewhere deep in my chest. He motioned toward the bench beneath the street lamp, and we both sat, slowly, like two people lowering themselves onto the edge of something fragile. I didn't expect to see you at the funeral, I said, voice barely steady. Samuel looked down at his hands, rubbing his thumb across a small scar near his knuckle. Your mother didn't expect it either, he said softly. But I promised her a long time ago that if the day ever came, if I was still alive, I'd make sure you finally got the truth. I swallowed. The truth about what? He glanced toward the cemetery, toward the freshly covered earth, toward the place where everything I thought I knew had already begun to unravel. About your father, he said, and about me. A tremor ran through me. Then start there. He nodded slowly, gathering himself. Your father's name was Thomas, and I don't mean the man you grew up calling your father. I mean the man who gave you your eyes, your quiet way of thinking, the way you tilt your head when you're confused, the man you never got to know. My throat tightened. My mother said he left. Samuel flinched, just barely. He did leave, but not because he stopped loving you, not because he didn't care. He left because he believed he was the wrong kind of man to raise a child. He carried demons he didn't know how to bury: drinking, guilt, anger at himself for mistakes no one else even remembered. He thought he'd hurt you. He could have asked for help, I whispered. He did, Samuel said gently. He asked me. I stared. He exhaled carefully, the air leaving him like a confession. Thomas was my little brother. The world stilled. I blinked slowly, waiting for the words to rearrange themselves into something that hurt less. My uncle, I said, voice thin. By blood, he confirmed. But I wasn't in your life because your mother thought having me around would only remind her of him, and she wasn't entirely wrong. We looked alike in those days. Same walk, same jawline, same way of filling a room with a kind of uneasy hope. I tried to picture him younger, standing beside a man who shared my face in ways I never got to witness. The thought made my chest ache. Why didn't she tell me? I asked. Because she didn't want you to grow up with an image of your father that wasn't perfect, Samuel said. She thought if she cut him out of the picture, she could cut out the pain too. And when he left, when he asked me to watch over both of you, she told me the best thing I could do was disappear too, and you listened. The question came out sharper than I intended. His shoulders sagged. I was younger than you are now, scared, lost, grieving my brother while trying not to drown in my own life. She begged me to stay away, said she needed a clean slate, said you deserved a life without men like us floating in and out of it. He swallowed hard, so I stayed away. I thought I was doing what was best. And now? I asked. And now, he said, voice raw, I know I was wrong. A long silence settled between us, thick heavy, shaped by years of choices none of us could take back. I watched him quietly, noticing the way his fingers trembled slightly, the way his eyes never stopped searching my face, as if measuring whether forgiveness was even an option. What happened to my father? I finally asked. His breath hitched. After he left town, he tried to get clean. He wrote me every few months, sometimes hopeful, sometimes ashamed. He always asked about you. Always he'd send newspaper clippings, screenshots, anything he could find about your milestones. He'd say, "Tell him I'm proud, Sam. Tell him I'm trying." But I never found the courage to bring those messages to you. I closed my eyes, fighting a rising wave of grief. Is he still alive? Samuel shook his head slowly. He passed away 10 years ago. In his sleep, sober, peaceful. The last letter he sent me said he hoped one day you'd know he loved you, even if you never knew his face. My voice broke. I didn't get the choice to know him. I know, Samuel whispered, eyes glassy. And I'm sorry. We sat there until the street lamp flickered above us. The night felt both endless and heartbreakingly small. Why come now? I asked again. Why after all these years? He hesitated before answering. Because I'm sick, he said quietly. My heart, it's failing. And I realized that if I didn't come today, I'd die carrying every truth I should have given you a lifetime ago. I loved your father more than I've ever loved anyone, and losing him broke something in me that I was too afraid to mend. But losing you without ever truly knowing you, that would be the regret I couldn't bear to take with me. His eyes met mine, pleading, honest. I'm not asking for much. Not forgiveness. Not a miracle. Just a chance. A chance to know you, even if it's just for whatever time I have left. It was the gentlest begging I'd ever heard. I looked at him, really looked. At the grief he carried. At the decades-old devotion he never spoke of. At the way his love had stayed quiet but constant, like a distant lighthouse. And somewhere deep inside me, anger loosened its grip just enough to let something else breathe. I don't want you to disappear again, I said softly. He went still. I want to know everything, I continued. About him, about you, about how all of this happened. I don't want the version I grew up with. I want the truth. And if you're willing, I'd like you in my life. Properly. Not as a stranger at a funeral. A single tear rolled down his cheek. I would like that, he whispered. More than you'll ever know. We talked for another hour about my father, about my mother, about their years of love and fear and missteps. Samuel told me stories about the first time my father held me, how his hands shook so badly he was afraid he'd drop me. He told me about a road trip they once took, the night my father confessed he didn't know how to be a good man but wanted to try. He told me that the day I was born was the happiest he'd ever seen his brother, and for the first time, the space in my chest that had always felt hollow began to fill not with answers, but with present. When we finally stood, the night was colder, but the world felt warmer somehow. What about tomorrow? I asked. There are boxes in my mother's house I haven't opened yet. Maybe we could look through them together. Samuel smiled, small, uneven, but full of light. I'll bring coffee, he said. Your mother always said I brewed it too strong. I like it strong, I replied. We walked to our cars slowly, quietly, like two people learning how to build something fragile with hands that had only ever known how to break things. Before he opened his door, he turned to me one last time. Thank you, he said, for letting an old coward finally try to be brave. I didn't know how to answer, so I simply nodded. He drove away, his taillights glowing red in the darkness until they disappeared around the corner. And I stood there beneath the trembling street lamp, holding the crumpled letter in my pocket, feeling the strange comfort of a truth that arrived late, but arrived all the same. Some families are built on stories we're told. Some are built on the stories that were kept from us. And some rare, miraculous are rebuilt the moment we choose to open the door.